Hello and welcome. On behalf of MLI, thank you for attending this presentation, the Wake Up Workshop Initiative, your practical, comprehensive guide to obstructive sleep apnea. We will be providing guidance to enhance the skills of healthcare providers who provide care to patients with or at risk for obstructive sleep apnea. My name is Dr. Jeremy McConnell, and I'm a board-certified obesity and sleep medicine specialist in Sarasota, Florida. And I'd like to introduce you to my co-presenters.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hi, I'm Dr. Nick Pennings. I'm a family physician and obesity medicine specialist and professor of family medicine at the Campbell University School of Osteopathic Medicine and director of clinical education for the Obesity Medicine Association.
Hi, I'm Carrissa Hankins. I'm a family nurse practitioner with experience in sleep and pulmonary medicine, and I'm located in Maine.
So welcome, everybody, and let's get started talking about screening for obstructive sleep apnea and the diagnosis of obstructive sleep apnea. Well, let's get started with establishing some baseline information about the importance of sleep. Sleep is, and some people would determine it to be, one of the key pillars for good health. Healthy sleep is critical for cognitive function, interpersonal relationships, mental health, cardiovascular health, cerebrovascular health, and metabolic health. And I think more attention is being paid to these different domains now than ever before. We know that a large percentage of adults in this country do suffer from some degree of sleep impairment, and it can be manifesting in different ways. So altering circadian rhythm has been shown to influence food intake, body composition, glycemic control, blood pressure regulation, lipid control, and ultimately result in an increased risk for cardiovascular disease and stroke. So the most prevalent significant sleep disorder is obstructive sleep apnea. And it affects a large percentage of the US population, but there's about 1 billion people in the world today who have obstructive sleep apnea. We define that using a metric called the Apnea-Hypopnea Index. And that is the number of breathing events per hour. So we take the sum of the apneas that are observed plus the hypopneas that are observed and divide that by the number of hours of sleep time. Now let's take a look at the different events and how we characterize them and how they contribute to that Apnea-Hypopnea Index. So first, we define an apnea as a reduction in airflow by at least 90% of the pre-event baseline that lasts for at least 10 seconds. There are two different forms of apnea. There are obstructive events and there are central events. The main distinction between these two is to whether or not there's an effort to breathe associated with the respiratory event. In the absence of respiratory effort, we consider it a central apnea event. When we see persistence of effort to breathe despite a stoppage of airflow, we consider it an obstructive event. The third form of respiratory event has a little bit of controversy as to how we define it. But essentially, it's a partial obstruction of the airway that we refer to as a hypopnea. When I'm explaining this to patients, I kind of call it an underbreathing, if you will. It's a partial loss of airway patency with a reduction of airflow of at least 30%, and it lasts for at least 10 seconds, and associated with a drop in pulse oximetry, oxygen saturation of at least 3 or 4%, and or associated with an arousal on EEG. Now, I realize it's kind of a complex definition, but if I like to try to simplify this, I would explain it as a partial airway blockage that is at least 10 seconds in duration and commonly associated with a drop in oxygen. So it doesn't rise to the level of a full airway collapse or rise to the level of a full apnea, but it's significant in that it relates to hypoxemia.